She wrapped her tiny paw around my wrist just as the vet softly said, "It's time." The room was bright and quiet, too quiet. She didn't cry, didn't whimper. This 4-month-old German Shepherd puppy just pressed her little body against my arm and held on. Her name wasn't even listed on the intake form, just female, requested euthanasia. She had no collar, no blanket, no note, only a torn brown towel stained with something I didn't want to identify. And her eyes didn't look sick. They looked frightened. It was a golden afternoon in Naples, Florida, and I stood in a clinic holding a puppy that someone had already given up on. They told me she'd been dropped off hours earlier for humane euthanasia after a leg injury. The front desk staff said, "It's not your case, Jake, just prep the room." But I couldn't move, because when I knelt down and looked into her face, she did something that broke every wall I'd built since losing my dog 2 years ago. She nudged her head under my chin and sighed, as if she'd found a place that wasn't cold for the first time in days. Her paw never left my wrist. The clock on the wall kept ticking. Everything inside me screamed, "Don't get attached. Don't open that door again." But her eyes followed me with one quiet question. Is this really how I go? Something inside me snapped. I wasn't ready to answer that. Not yet. I carried her out of the prep room and into the hallway like she was made of glass. No one stopped me. No one asked questions. Maybe it was the way I held her, like I was already grieving something I hadn't lost yet. I took her to the small exam room in the back, the one with the crooked blinds and the broken light switch. I needed space. I needed time, and I needed to know what was really wrong with this German Shepherd puppy before someone put a needle in her vein and erased her like she never mattered. Her towel smelled like old urine and fear. I laid it on the table anyway and gently unwrapped her. Her right hind leg was swollen, yes, but I'd seen worse. No open wounds, no visible fractures. She flinched when I touched the joint, but she didn't cry. She just looked at me as though she'd already accepted whatever fate we were about to give her. I felt bile rise in my throat. The paperwork said, non-weight bearing, possible pelvic trauma, no funds for surgery. That was it. No x-rays. No blood work, just scribbles and a checkbox next to euthanize. I whispered, "Who did this to you?" But she didn't answer. She just watched me with those eyes ancient and tired in a baby's face. I called up the imaging room and told them I needed a priority scan. They said we were backed up. I didn't care. "I'm walking her over now," I said. They didn't argue. She was light in my arms, too light. Her ribs pressed through her fur, and the smell of neglect clung to her skin. I passed 2 adoption volunteers in the hallway, and one said, "Is that the one they dropped off this morning?" I thought, she was gone already. I didn't reply, because in that moment, with her heart thumping quietly against my chest, I knew something they didn't. She wasn't gone. Not yet. The x-ray room was cold, but her nose was warm against my neck. She didn't squirm. Didn't fight. This German Shepherd puppy just curled into me like I was the only thing left in her world. I laid her down gently, whispering, "I'm right here, Luna." I don't know why I said that name. It just slipped out like I'd known her all along. Like from the moment she touched my wrist, something inside me remembered how to care again. The technician glanced at the chart and frowned. "Wait, isn't this the one scheduled for?" "Not anymore," I cut in. We scanned her legs, pelvis, and spine. I stood there, arms crossed, trying to hide how hard my hands were shaking. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that the injury was massive, that there really was no hope. Because if I was right, someone had signed this puppy's death warrant out of nothing but apathy. The images flickered onto the monitor and my jaw clenched. Hairline fracture in the right femur. No pelvic damage, no internal bleeding, no nerve. Issues just pain and swelling. She didn't need to die. She needed someone to care. I turned to the tech, my voice hoarse. She can recover. He blinked. But the paperwork, forget the paperwork, I snapped. This isn't over. Back in the exam room, I held her again. Her little body curled under my arm, like she'd been waiting for the verdict. I looked into those dark eyes, and she blinked. Slowly, as if to say, "Thank you for seeing me." But under that quiet gratitude, I felt something else stirring something sharp. Rage. Not at her, but at them. Whoever dumped her. Whoever couldn't be bothered to ask for help. Whoever thought. This puppy's life was disposable. I wrapped her back in the towel. This time, it didn't feel like trash, it felt like armor. And I made a decision right then, without asking permission. I wasn't letting her go. I didn't clock out that night. I stayed with her. The clinic emptied. Phone stopped ringing. The mop buckets came out, and the lights dimmed to that low. Yellow haze that makes everything feel like a hospital waiting room at 3 a.m., but I didn't leave. I couldn't. This German Shepherd puppy, Luna, the name already stuck in my chest, was curled on a folded blanket beside my desk. Her leg was wrapped, her breath shallow but steady. Every few minutes, she opened one eye to make sure I was still there. And I was. I pulled an old chair close to the floor and leaned back, arms crossed, watching her. I should have been tired. But my body was wired with a kind of ache that isn't physical. The kind that grabs your gut and doesn't let go. 2 years ago, I buried my dog, Sadie, after a drunk driver jumped the curb outside my apartment. She was 15 years old, deaf in one ear, arthritic, and slow. But she was my girl. After she died, I swore I'd never get close again. Not to another dog, not to that kind of love. Because love like that, it breaks you when it ends. But here I was, sitting on the floor with this broken little soul who'd barely had a chance to live. And somehow, she was waking something up in me I thought I'd buried with Sadie. Around midnight, Luna stirred. She shifted her weight, winced, then gently scooted across the blanket until her paw rested against my boot. Just that a touch, deliberate, brave, trusting. I stared at her, throat tight. Why are you doing this to me? I wanted to say why now, but I already knew. Because some lives come back into yours, not to be rescued, but to rescue you. I sat there, watching her chest rise and fall, listening to the silence. And for the first time in years, I hoped morning wouldn't come too soon. Luna didn't move much the next morning, and that scared me more than I let on. She was breathing, yes, eyes open, blinking. But something was different. The spark from last night, the tiny push of her paw against my boot, that silent declaration of, "I'm still here," was dimmer, fainter, like a candle struggling to stay. Lit in a room with no air. I knelt beside her and ran my hand over her back. Her fur was hot, too hot. I grabbed a thermometer, 104.6. That wasn't normal soreness. That was fever, infection. I checked the bandage on her leg. No bleeding, no odor. But her body was waging a quiet war, and I hadn't seen the enemy coming. I carried her to the treatment room, cradling her head in my elbow. She didn't lift it, just pressed closer like she was saying sorry for needing me, as if asking for help was some kind of burden. It wasn't, not even close. I hooked her up to fluids, started broad-spectrum antibiotics, adjusted her position, checked for any signs of systemic failure. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Still, my chest wouldn't unclench. This German Shepherd puppy had made it through abandonment, hunger, a fracture, and almost being euthanized. And now, with her first chance at survival, her body was failing her. And all I could think was, not after everything. One of the junior techs walked in and saw me hunched over her. Is she crashing? I didn't answer. My eyes were locked on her small rib cage, willing it to rise again. "She's fighting," I whispered. "She just needs more time." But part of me knew time doesn't always listen. I stayed with her the rest of the day, barely moving, barely breathing. And every time she shifted, even slightly, I leaned in and said the same thing over and over. "Hold on, Luna, please hold on." By nightfall, her body was trembling, not violently, but just enough to make me feel helpless in a way I hadn't felt since the day we lost Sadie. A low rhythmic shiver ran through her tiny frame, like her muscles were holding on tighter than her will could manage. Her temperature had dropped slightly, but her energy was non-existent. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't lift her head. She barely opened her eyes when I called her name. Still, I stayed. I moved her 4-line, adjusted her blanket, sat next to her on the floor like some kind of silent sentinel, willing my presence to matter. Maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. But I knew what happened to dogs left alone in moments like this. They give up. And this German Shepherd puppy had come too far to give up now. At 2 a.m. I thought she stopped breathing. I panicked. My hand flew to her chest. There it was, shallow, but there. I exhaled so hard I thought I'd collapse. She stirred just barely. Her ear twitched. Her paw jerked slightly toward me like she was reaching for something she couldn't see. That was when I whispered it again. The thing I hadn't said out loud, not to her, not to anyone. "If you stay, I swear I'll never let you go." The room was silent except for the soft hum of machines and her delicate breaths. Something shifted in me. The walls I'd built, the numbness I'd clung to for years, cracked. Because this wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about saving the part of me I'd lost when I let grief turn into distance. But even as that thought formed, a sudden beep on her monitor spiked. Her pulse was climbing too fast. I leaned forward, voice tight. No, stay with me." The screen flashed again. I hit the call button, grabbed the stethoscope. Her heart was racing, her body reacting to something we hadn't seen coming. The infection was fighting back, and so was she. The only question now was, who would win? The worst part of fear isn't the panic. It's the stillness after. That long, suffocating quiet when you don't know if you've lost or if there's still something left to hold on to. I sat by her side for what felt like hours, watching her vitals fluctuate, then stabilize, then spike again. Her little body was burning through everything it had. I kept whispering her name, kept cooling her with damp cloths, adjusting her meds, checking her for every 5 minutes like it would change the outcome. But somewhere just before dawn, something shifted. Her breathing slowed. Not in a terrifying way, but like she'd found a rhythm. Her pulse steadied. The violent shaking in her legs stopped. The machine stopped beeping. And Luna, this broken little shepherd puppy who had been handed over to die, let out the smallest sigh I'd ever heard. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was peace. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, afraid to believe what I was seeing, afraid to even exhale. I'd been running on adrenaline and sheer will for so long that I wasn't sure if this was a real turn or just the eye of the storm. But then she did something I hadn't seen in over 24 hours. She licked my wrist just once. Not dramatic, not showy, just soft, intentional, and I nearly broke. Because in that tiny moment, she told me she wasn't done. She told me she still had fight. I stayed next to her, eyes never leaving hers. Her breathing was shallow but steady. I stood there, heart in my throat, realizing I hadn't exhaled properly in hours. That tail of hers gave the tiniest thump. Not a wag, not joy, just acknowledgement. I crouched back down. She rose slowly, cautiously, then stepped forward on her own. The movement was awkward, uneven. Her back leg dragged just a little, but it was real, hers, and I just stood there, mouth open, watching this tiny German Shepherd puppy cross the floor like she was claiming it. Luna. I barely breathed the name. She paused halfway, looked up, and let out the softest bark I'd ever heard. It was raspy, barely a note, but it hit me harder than a scream. I crouched down, tears blurring my eyes, and held out my hands. She moved faster, still limping, still fragile, but with purpose now, with certainty. She collided into my chest and collapsed into my arms like she belonged there. Like this was the ending she'd been fighting for all along. The vet behind me gasped, "No way." Someone else clapped, then another. I turned and saw the whole team gathered at the doorway watching, smiling, some of them crying. "She shouldn't be able to do that yet," one of them whispered. "She shouldn't be alive," I said, holding her close. "But here she is." Luna curled into me, nose tucked under my chin, tail sweeping slowly across my arm. I felt her heartbeat steady and warm against my ribs, not desperate, not fading, alive, present, and choosing me. Later that afternoon, I walked her out into the clinic garden. The sun was bright, bouncing off the white gravel paths. Birds chirped in the trees, and Luna lifted her nose into the breeze like she'd never felt air before. She took careful steps, sniffed flowers, paused to stare at butterflies. I gave her a soft command, "Sit." She sat immediately without hesitation. My breath caught. "She remembers," I whispered. "She's learning." She turned toward me, and for the first time, I saw it. Not just survival, not just recovery. I saw recognition. Bond, love. She wasn't a temporary case anymore. Not a recovery file, not a misdiagnosis, not a chart scheduled for erasure. She was Luna. She was home. So why then was there an adoption application with her name on it waiting on my desk? They came in just before closing, smiling, warm, all sunshine and soft voices. A young couple, early 30s, 2 kids waiting in the car, a printed application in hand. The woman wore a shirt with a cartoon shepherd on it. The man brought dog treats. In his pocket, they'd seen Luna on the shelter's adoption board. Someone from the team uploaded a photo this morning. Her sitting in the garden, ears perked, eyes bright. "She's beautiful," the woman said. "You must have worked hard." "With her," I nodded. My mouth was too dry to speak. "She looks like she'd do great with kids," the man added. "We've got a fenced acre pool, shaded areas. We both work from home. We've been looking for the right rescue." When we saw her face ... they didn't need to say it. I looked through the window. Luna was lying under the lemon tree, head resting on her paws, tail twitching in sleep. Her coat shimmered in the sun. Her bandaged leg, though still healing, didn't look broken anymore, just lived in. "Can we meet her?" the woman asked gently. I led them outside. Luna stirred when she heard my footsteps. She lifted her head, blinked sleepily, then perked up as I knelt beside her. "Hey, baby girl, you've got visitors." I expected her to hesitate, maybe even lean into me, but instead, she rose slowly and walked toward the couple, curious and calm. She sniffed the man's hand, nuzzled the woman's palm, let them stroke her ears, and my heart cracked. "She's amazing," the woman whispered. The man turned to me. "We'd love to bring her home." I forced a smile. My throat was closing. They crouched beside her, called her name. Luna looked at them, tail giving a small wag. Then she turned, walked back to me, and sat at my feet. Not just sat, planted herself. Solid, intentional. The woman laughed softly. "Guess she's not ready yet." But the man was watching me closer, eyes narrowed, not unkindly. "Or maybe," he said, "she already knows where she belongs." I looked down at her. She looked up, and that's when it hit me. What I'd been afraid to admit since the moment she laid her paw on my wrist. She chose me. Not because I healed her, but because she healed me first. I cleared my throat, heart pounding. She's not going anywhere, not without me. The couple didn't argue. They just smiled, nodded, and handed back the application. I walked inside, took a blank adoption form from the drawer, filled in my name, and at the bottom, I signed one word. Mine. Mornings feel different now. Luna waits by the door while I tie my boots, her tail thudding softly against the floor. The sun slants through the windows, catching the warm gold in her fur. Her leg doesn't even limp anymore. It's strong, healed, proud. We walk into the shelter together, not as rescuer and rescued as partners. She knows the routine. Trot straight to the intake room where the newest arrivals are trembling in corners, eyes wide, ribs showing, the fearful, the forgotten, just like she was. She doesn't bark, doesn't jump. She simply lies down beside them and waits. That's her magic. No pressure, no rush. Just presence. A tiny husky pup named Clover was the first to respond. She'd been dumped on the roadside in a trash bag. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't lift her head. Luna approached her slowly, gently. Then, without a sound, she placed one paw on Clover's paw, and Clover didn't flinch, didn't pull away. She sighed. Now she follows Luna around like a shadow.